All right, further evidence for the defense?
Defense calls Christina Love.
Would you place your left hand on the Bible? Raise your right, please. You solemnly swear the answers you get, you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Have a seat.
Mr. Brown?
Good morning, Christina. Could you please tell the jury your name?
My name is Christina Love.
And how do you know Travion?
Travion is my brother. We have the same father and different mothers.
How old are you?
I am 23. I'll be 24 in May.
So how many months apart are you and Travion?
About 6 months.
I could talk with you a few moments more about Travion. I'll just get a little bit background about you. Where do you live?
In Cary, North Carolina.
And where do you work?
Right now I work at a breakfast restaurant. We serve breakfast and lunch.
To ask you a little bit about your relationship with Travion. Did you two grow up in the same house?
No, we did not.
Well, how often would you see Travion when you were growing up?
A lot. Throughout the course of my years, it was my mom kind of forced the relationship with me and my father, so she would drop me off, and of course, being that Travion lived with my dad, I would see him that way.
Who is your father?
His name is Michael Clark.
How would you describe Michael Clark as a parent?
Very selfish, very malicious, and negligent.
Objection.
It's a lay opinion, Your Honor.
I'm going to allow it, but it will need further foundation. I'm going to condition it on further foundation.
Okay. Well, let's talk about how would your father treat you when you were at his house?
Sometimes like I wasn't really there. It didn't really hold any significance to him, to be honest. So I can't really say he treated me any way that I thought I should have been treated when I was there.
When you would go there, how long would you spend there?
If it was during the school year, I'd be there on some weekends. If it was during the summer, I'd be there maybe 2 weeks at a time or a month. It really just depends.
Who else was living at the house when you were there?
There was my father, Michael Clark, my stepmother, who he was married to, Travion, my 2 older stepsisters, who are my stepmom's daughters from her previous marriage or relationship, and my 2 younger brothers.
You said that you described him as being negligent. What did you mean by that?
He was very cold, didn't really care too much about anything other than himself, if that makes sense.
You would see, when you were there, you would see how he, while you were there, you could see him, how he treated Travion. How did he treat Travion?
He treated him like the outsider, like he never really wanted him to be there in the first place. Like it was more of a burden than it was a joy for him to be his father.
Why did he say things that made you reach that opinion?
For example, he would mentally torment Travion. Like he could do something minor, like break something, and my dad would torment him and say, well, it's not like you have anywhere else to go. I don't want you to be here. Wish your mom wanted you. I'll kick you out. Or he used to make threats to send him to Holly Hill. Do you want to go with the crazy people if you do something else, or that sort of thing?
So he would say that frequently? About
Yes.
how old was Travion when he was making these comments?
This is something that I've heard consistently my entire life since me and Travion were younger, so it's something that never stopped. It wasn't something that happened at a specific age.
You said that he made references to him that he would have to go to Holly Hill. You know what Holly Hill is?
Yes, a mental institution.
Were you aware if Travion had ever been there?
Overruled.
Yes.
Did you ever see times when your dad would punish Travion?
Yes.
Could you tell us how he would punish him?
Sorry. In any way possible, physically leaping on him, punching him, hitting him with things, throwing him, just everything in any way possible, how he wanted to, I guess.
Did you ever see your father drink alcohol?
Yes.
How would your father act when he was drinking alcohol?
Angry, hostile, negative.
Was it different than when he had not been drinking?
There wasn't really a difference to me, except when he would drink, it would be a little more escalated, if that makes sense.
You remember any times when Travion would be punished for things that you did?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
My dad used to have a stick shift truck, and I specifically remember we were outside. My little two brothers were in the back seat, and me and Travion were in the front seat. I forced him to let me pretend that I was driving. I was moving the transmission stick gear, and the car went down the hill and into a ditch. And before my father came outside, Travion said, "Don't say anything," and he took the blame for me so I wouldn't get in trouble.
And what happened to Travion?
My father beat him pretty badly.
You remember about how old you were when this happened?
Maybe, I wasn't in my teen years yet, I know that. I had to be maybe somewhere between 8 and maybe 10.
And so Travion would have been about a few months younger than you at that time?
Yes, we're neck and neck.
When you stayed with Travion, did he when you stayed at the home where Michael Clark and Travion were living, did Travion have his own bedroom?
No, he did not.
Did he have his own bed?
No, he did not.
How did Travion treat you?
Like I was his angel. He was just so filled with joy to see me and spend time with me and exchange the love that my father was not willing to give him.
I'll ask you a few questions about Travion's mother. Well, let me ask you this. You talked about spending some time with Travion. Who did you spend most of the time with when you were growing up?
My mom.
Your mom. Do you know who Travion's mother is?
Yes, I do.
Have you ever met her?
Maybe once or twice, from what I can remember from my childhood memories.
Do you ever remember a time when Travion was waiting for his mom to visit?
Yes, multiple times.
And what happened when was this something that he thought a visit was going to come?
Yes, he would wait and anticipate, or my father would say, your mom's going to come today, and Travion would be excited and waiting and dedicating his entire day to sitting and waiting for his mom to come see him.
What happened when she came?
She never came.
She never came?
I can't recall one time that she's come.
And how did Travion react when his mom didn't come?
He was very emotional. When we were younger, he was very confused. Why? What's wrong with me? Why doesn't she want a relationship with me? That was the effects that I saw and the things that were being shared amongst us.
Do you ever recall any efforts being made to try to find Travion's mom while you were staying with your dad?
There was one time specifically that I can recall when I was little. I can't honestly state the age. I know I had to be less than 5, maybe 6. Maybe 6, I think. My dad took the initiative to go find Travion's mom, so we got in the car and we were riding around some pretty rough parts of Raleigh trying to find her.
But did you find her? Did you ever see a time when you saw Travion having nightmares?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
Sometimes he would wake up upset and emotional, or sometimes he would wake up at peace but just very broken and kind of, questioning things and trying to find clarity of why his life was the way that it was.
About how old was he when he was having these nightmares?
I really can't specify a specific age. It's something that's kind of always occurred.
That's fine. I'm going to ask you just a few questions about 2013. Well, did there come a time as you were growing up when you quit going to spend time at Michael Clark's house?
Yes. When I was 16, my mom married my stepdad, and when they began dating, my stepdad also began to date me and my sister, for example. He took us out to dinner, asked us questions, our favorite colors, tried to get to know us as individuals. So prior to that, I had always questioned what was wrong with me and why my dad didn't want a relationship with me. But when my mom married my stepdad and I actually had that father figure, it was null and void. It was something that no longer was a priority to me, because now I have that father figure and somebody who is not obligated to love me but is going above and beyond to do those things. So once I was old enough to speak up for myself and not have to go to those forced visits, I didn't go. I just made sure to keep in contact with Travion.
Okay, so during that time, you still kept in contact with him?
Yes, consistently.
Ask you questions. In 2013, shortly before his arrest, do you remember seeing Travion sometime before that?
Yes.
Okay. And you probably don't remember the exact date, and that's fine, but...
I do not remember the exact day or month, to be honest, but he popped up at my house, at my apartment.
And what did he ask you?
He had told me about what happened with my dad. He was very upset. My dad had kicked him out, and
It's stipulated to, Your Honor. And it's just going to the foundation with it.
All right, go ahead.
my father kicked him out, and he told me he needed somewhere to stay.
Were you able to give him a place to stay?
I was not at that time. I had just lost my job, and my partner at that time was taking on most of the financial responsibilities, and we were also working through some things at the time. I didn't feel like it was fair to ask her to not only pick up my slack that I'm not able to bring forth to the table, but to also bring on the challenge of moving Travion in and helping him at that time.
Have you talked with your father about testifying today?
I did.
Overruled.
I did.
And what did he tell you about your decision to testify?
I'm sorry. His exact words, am I able to say his exact words? His exact words were, kiss my ass, fuck you bitch, and burn in hell. And then he hung up in my face.
Did you get the impression he was upset that you were going to say things about him?
He was. He said specifically that his past did not have anything to do with Travion, and things that he has done or how he has raised him as a parent was not important. He didn't want me to reveal any of the things about who he was as a person and who he was as a parent.
Do you love Travion?
I do.
Do you want him to continue to be part of your life?
I do. I would give anything to do that.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Waller?
If I may have just a moment.
Yes.
When Travion came to your apartment back in 2013, he needed a place to stay, didn't he?
He did.
And you know why he needed a place to stay?
But yes, because my father kicked him out.
And was there another reason why he needed a place to stay at that point?
To my knowledge, it was just him and my dad not getting along, and
Well, there needed to be some direction as to other people being able to locate him, didn't there?
I'm sorry?
People need to be able to locate Travion back in 2013, didn't they?
Yes.
Okay. Who were those people that needed to be able to locate him?
Objection.
may need to be heard outside the
All
presence.
right. Members of the jury, I'm going to ask you to step in the deliberation room for a moment. Please don't talk about the case among yourselves. Leave your notepads in your chairs. I'm assuming this relates to the electronic monitoring for, was it pretrial release or
He was on post-release supervision.
post-release supervision?
Yes, sir. And so,
All right. And-
my understanding is probation had given him a deadline to find somewhere else to go, and it appears maybe this is where he tried to go and was unsuccessful in that. But I don't necessarily know everything that she's going to say either, in full candor.
All right. Ms. D, Mr. Brown.
I think, the evidence has been kicked out of the home. I think that this is not something that should open the door to that evidence, if it's otherwise not opened the door to it, and about the parole system, the probation situation, probation or parole, post-supervised release situation with it. They have asked other people if he asked for a place to stay. We know that he's been kicked out of his home, and she said that he did come to her and she wasn't able to provide a place.
And-
That's the relevance of it.
And she did already testify that she didn't know of any reason besides her father being angry. And I would suggest that the question of did people need to be able to find him is a sort of wide open question. To me, that doesn't indicate that she has any knowledge about any of these matters.
In fairness, I was trying not to. I was trying to play by the rules a
Yes.
little bit.
I do think that in a general sense, the anger that is being testified to by Mr. Smith's regarding that Mr. Smith's father demonstrated, I think, out of fairness, the state is entitled to inquire into that, and the fact that a son is on probation, violating the law, requires supervision, monitoring, are fair areas of inquiry. And whether this is the point where they get brought in or through some other witness, I don't know. But I do think that since the defense is examining the conduct of Mr. Smith's father, I think that it is fair for the state to cross-examine about all of the factors that may cause the father to be angry with his son. So I think that this line of question is admissible, and so I'm going to allow it through this witness. I don't know what Ms. Love knows about this, but if she does, then I think that it's a fair area of inquiry for the state.
Based on 15A, 2000, 5th, 6th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. And I will renew that objection, but for those reasons.
All right. So let's go ahead and bring the jurors in. I'm going to overrule the...
To see whether she does have that information. I don't know if I'm almost asking more than
I
making
don't know
official.
if it's necessary that she knows it or she doesn't, so I think just simply re-ask the question and go from there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience again. The objection is overruled. Mr. Waller, if you'd re-ask your question, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Love, were you aware that individuals or people were looking for Travion Smith as well?
Yes.
Okay, and you were aware that he was on probation at the time?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time, he had been kicked out of this, you say he was been kicked out of his father's house because of, that his father was angry with him, but his father also knew that he was on probation and that he was not following those rules. Is that right?
No. To my understanding, my dad kicked Travion out with malicious intent. It wasn't anything that he necessarily did wrong, or whether it was with who was looking for him or in the household. It was pure malicious intent.
Miss Love, your brother was on probation at the time he came to look for you, wasn't he? He came to ask you to live with him, right?
Yes.
And he needed a place to stay because it's a requirement of probation that he have a stable residence.
When he asked to stay with me, that honestly didn't hold any relevance. He just simply asked, can I stay here because I don't want to stay with my father? Things are going to continue to escalate and be bad for me, and I'm not going to have the opportunity to better myself the way that I want to staying with my father. And I feel as though he came to me because he felt I could have helped aid him to further his opportunities in turning his life around.
But you didn't help him that day, did you?
With a place to stay, no.
And you knew he needed a place to stay because he was on probation?
Yes.
You lived primarily with your mother?
Yes.
Okay. How many times would you say in a year that you actually went over to your father's house?
Maybe 10 to 12. It's a lot.
10 to 12 during the course of a year?
But dispersing that between weekends, I mean, that's 3 days, and then weeks at a time, whether it was 1 or 2 or for a whole month or something during the summer. I mean, it's always been.
Well, now all of a sudden you're saying you spent a whole month with him, and you didn't testify to that earlier, did you?
Well, I'm saying sporadically throughout my entire childhood, since it was a relationship that was forced, me and my father. My mother would drop me off on weekends or drop me off during the summer. So during the course of my entire life, I have consistently been in and out of that home, per se, I guess.
Fair to say you don't have a very good relationship with your father.
No, I do not.
And you didn't want him in the courtroom before you testified, did you?
That is correct.
And you really weren't over there at his house that much, were you? To see this interaction with Travion and his father.
Yes, I feel I was.
So during how many years? You said you left that house when you were about 16 years old?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, not left, just stopped going.
Stop going.
Right.
And when was the first time that you remember going over to that house where Travion was living with his father? How old were you?
I honestly am not sure, only because my relationship with Travion, I'm not sure how to answer that question.
You don't know what, if you were 10 years old when you first started going and seeing Travion?
Oh, when I first started going, it's something that has been happening since I was like 1 or 2. I mean,
Okay.
my entire childhood, I remember meetings, being picked up, dropped off.
Miss Love, you've been able to get a job?
Yes.
Okay. You work somewhere now?
Yes, I do.
You've been able to get a place of your own, it sounds like.
Yes.
And that's despite this interactions that you've had with your father that you've characterized to us as not a happy relationship.
That is correct. I
You've
feel
been
as
able
though.
to do things on your own. Yes or no?
No. my mother helped me as far as my foundation of, paying bills, finding an apartment, getting a job, staying on the right track. I mean, I had the ability to escape that entire world that consisted of my father. So I was able to go through things that hurt me and has still had a negative effect on me, and be able to have that escape and healing process and rehabilitate myself from those things that have happened. Travion did not have that opportunity because the only parent that he did have was the one parent who it seemed like was going above and beyond to not only express that he didn't want him, but he didn't really care to help him in any way, shape, or form.
He didn't have the opportunity to go to school.
Yes.
He didn't have the opportunity to go out and find a job.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Love. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect.
Yes, sir. Again, the person that you primarily spent time with was your mother, correct?
Correct.
Did she treat you the same way as your dad did?
No.
Who on your father's side, what members of the family on your father's side pursued a relationship with you?
None of them? Besides Travion?
Only Travion? Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Waller.
How many times between the age of 16 and 20 did you see Travion?
I honestly wouldn't be able to put an exact number on that, unfortunately. Travion has always made sure to find me or call me. If he didn't have a consistent landline or address or something like that, he always made sure to go above and beyond to ask me, was I okay? Pop up at my house, call me from somewhere, somehow. So.
How many times did you see him between the ages of 16 and 20?
I'm not sure what exact number to really give, because like I said, the visiting and us conversing has been consistent even between the age of 16 to this day. So I've always saw him maybe, if you want a number, 10 times a year, spoke to him way more than that, made sure to call me at least every 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down. Further evidence for the defense?
The defense calls Candy Albrecht.
Raise your right, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, ma'am. Please proceed.
Mr. Brown?
All right. Ms. Albrecht, could you tell the jury your name?
My name is Candy Albrecht, formerly Candy Love.
We just heard testimony from Christina Love. Is she any relationship to you?
She's my daughter.
Do you know Travion?
Yes, I do.
Okay. How do you know Travion?
Travion is Christina's brother. They're 6 months apart.
Do they have the same father in common?
Yes, they do.
And who is that?
Michael Clark.
Could you describe how your relationship with Michael Clark?
Currently or in the past?
Why don't we start, well, when did you first meet Michael Clark?
I met Michael when I was home from college and was taking a break. I'd had my other child that's older than Christina, and I met him through a friend.
And I forgot to ask some just background questions, but where do you live?
I live here in Cary.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
I'm a manager for a major retail store.
Okay. And going back, so did you and Michael Clark start dating?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And at some point you became pregnant with Christina?
I did, and we got engaged.
You got engaged. And did you get to know members of his family?
Yes, I did.
What happened to that engagement?
Over a holiday while I was at Michael's home planning for our wedding, and that was coming up for the next year. I was there when he got a phone call from someone that I didn't know at the time, constantly calling over and over and over and over. And when I finally got the phone from him, I was told that he needed to come pick up his son. And I said to the person on the other line that his son was already there.
Talking about with his son.
He has another son previously before Christina. So I thought that that's who she was talking about, but she said no, his other son. And so when I questioned him about it, that's when I found out that he had had an affair or cheated, and that's when I found out about Travion.
How old was Christina at that point?
She was 1.
So are you aware of the age difference between Travion and Christina?
I didn't at the time until,
Are you aware of it now?
yes.
So how old would a Travion been about that time? If she was 1,
If she was 1, then he was just being born, maybe 6 months, because they're only 6 months in age, literally.
And what happened to your relationship with Michael Clark at that point?
Obviously, I ended the relationship when I found out about Travion, and the fact that his whole family knew about this and other relationships that he was having and didn't share it with me.
Despite how that relationship ended, did you keep Christina away from her father at first? Well, did you keep Christina away from her father?
Not at first. I always, for both my daughters, I've always ensured that they had their own opinion about their father and had their own relationship with their father. And they can both attest that I've never said anything negative about their fathers to them. That I encourage them to seek a relationship with them outside of me and what I had experienced in my own hurts and betrayals. I wanted them to grow it themselves. So in the beginning, I didn't keep them apart.
And did Christina often go spend time staying with Michael Clark?
Yes, she did. She would go for weekend visits, or maybe a week in the summer or a holiday when he would show up, or we could find him and he was around and wanted to be in her life.
And as a result of that, did you get to know Travion?
Yes, I did.
Did Travion ever come and spend any time with you?
Yes, I saw Travion here and there. I mean, obviously, he wasn't my direct child, so my interaction with him was limited to when their father was around, and I would see him.
Did there come a time when Travion was a young kid that he said anything about wanting to live with you?
Yes, he and his sister are very close, not just in age, but just in relationship and fellowship with each other. And when I would interact with him, I would give him the same amount of love and time and talk to him and the things that I would with any normal child. And it got to the point where he had asked me to be his mommy, if I would take care of him the way I took care of Christina.
Do you remember how? Let me take a second. Do you remember how old Travion was when he asked you to do that?
He was young, maybe 5, 6, or 7. I don't recall the age.
Was and when he was over with you during the time, that was the time when you would care for him when he was with you?
Of course. I would treat him just like I would my 2 daughters.
And did you ever, when he made this request of you, what did you do? Did you ever talk to Michael Clark about what he said to you?
Yes.
Could you tell us about that?
When I brought it up with Michael, obviously I told Travion that it wasn't my decision, that I would have to talk to his dad about it and see what he said. And so when I brought it up to Michael that I was willing to do this and be there for him and be in his life, Michael said he would do it, but it was conditional.
What was the condition?
That I had to take him back in order to have Travion. I couldn't have just Travion without him being back in my life.
Was that acceptable to you?
No, absolutely not.
When we talked about the fact that Christina would spend some time with Michael Clark, how did she act after she'd been spent time with him?
When she would come back home, I would have to put the pieces back together and answer the questions that she may have about why her father did this, or if he was a certain way, or why he disciplined his kids the way he did, and she would be hurt and confused and angry. And as a mom trying to undo that and raise someone to know that they're loved and in a safe place, you would have to spend the time to ensure that they understood what they needed to understand to feel loved again and safe again.
Does it sound about right that she would continue, though, to see him at least periodically until she was about 16 years old?
Whenever it was convenient for him. He would disappear. We wouldn't know where he was, or I didn't know who to contact, if he paid child support, if he wanted to be in his, it was completely on him.
But she would still see him somewhat until about that age?
Yes,
Okay. And was that about the time that you got married?
that is. I got married to their stepfather, yes.
No further questions.
Cross-examination. You continue to let Christina go over to that house.
That is correct.
Christina has come in here and described Michael Clark as a monster, essentially.
That is correct.
And her testimony was that you forced her to go over to that house.
I made sure there was a relationship, but I didn't know the level of abuse that was going on.
She didn't come home and tell you about her Michael Clark jumping on Travion and beating him?
Not to the extent of where I understood it was so horrific that she and he didn't need to be there.
I mean, you just testified that you know that there was abuse going on in that home, at least towards Travion. Correct?
That is correct.
And you continued to force your daughter to go over there.
I did, and I regret that. And she knows that, and I've said that to her continuously and other people. And I've tried to seek help for that for both of them. I wasn't perfect as a parent.
And I'm not talking about you being perfect as a parent, ma'am, but I'm talking about you were aware, either through Christina or yourself, about this significant abuse that both of you have described, and for 16 years you forced her to go over there.
For 16 years, again, I did not know, obviously, when a 6-year-old is telling you that her brother got a spanking or got a beating. It isn't described the same way a 23-year-old would describe it right now.
Well, you said a moment ago that she would have to put the pieces back together when she came home.
Yes.
And your daughter's coming home and you're having to put the pieces back together, but you're still sending her over there to
The pieces back together was her crying because she doesn't understand. The pieces being put back together was her questioning or not whether or not she was good enough. The pieces coming back together was not understanding why someone yells or someone can't go outside. It's those types of pieces. It wasn't her telling me that someone is being hurt to the level of that.
Ma'am, you never got Child Protective Services involved, did you?
I didn't get Child Protective Services. No, I didn't.
You didn't call Raleigh Police Department or Cary Police Department, wherever it is, and say this abuse is going on over at that house?
Yes, I did, actually.
You did?
Yes, if you will, there should be a note somewhere that it was turned in because there was a previous investigation that was going on.
Okay. When did you do that?
I can't tell you the exact day, sir.
What year? Well, how old were they? Well, let me ask you this. Did Christina still go over to that house?
Not around that time, no.
So you called the police and...
No, I didn't say I called the police. You said that.
Well, you said you made a note, or there's a note somewhere.
No, I said there was an investigation. There should be a note because I was asked about situations that were going on when he was married to Jackie and other things like that.
But you never called.
I never called him.
And you allowed her to go over there until she was 16 years old.
I did.
At which point she decided that she didn't want to go over there anymore because she had this stepfather that it appears that both of you love.
That both of us what?
Love.
Well, I didn't love him then. I mean, I loved him previously. not when she was 16. I was getting married.
Right, I'm saying the stepfather that she apparently loves now.
Oh, yes.
And that you love. It sounds like it's a good situation now.
Yes.
But so when that situation came around is when she stopped going and seeing her father.
Yes, but remember, she was already just seeing him sporadically anyway. It wasn't an every day or every weekend kind of thing.
Well, she testified that she saw him about 10 times a year or more. She was kind of unclear of that, but 10 to 12 times a year.
I can't say it was 10 times. That's her opinion. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about Travion. He came to you and asked for you to get him out of the house.
Hmm.
And you didn't do it.
I did not, and I regret it to this day. I mean, obviously anybody would feel regret for something that they didn't do if they knew they could have prevented someone from being hurt.
Exactly, from Melissa Huggins-Jones being murdered.
Objection.
Sustained.
Move the strike.
Jurors to disregard. Miss, pronounce your last name for me.
Albrecht.
I'm sorry.
Albrecht.
Albrecht. And Miss Albrecht, at the point in which Travion came and asked, you said Michael Clark asked that the only condition in which you take him back was, only condition in which Travion could get out of that house was if you took him back.
Well, not get out. I mean, he wanted us to all be a family,
But
not
again-
just be with Travion. He wanted me to be with him as well.
But again, at that point, you didn't call CPS to get Travion out of the house.
No, I did not.
Have you seen Travion at all since?
I haven't seen him since he was in high school.
Okay. So you haven't seen him since Christina left at 16 years old? Or stopped going over there at 16 years old?
It might have been a little more after that, but I can't say per se what the date was or the time frame. I can't give you a date for that. But that was, I guess I would talk to him more on the phone than I would see him physically.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
Redirect.
Ma'am, it's safe to say that over the years, and looking back, there's a lot of things about what happened that you regret.
Absolutely. No one wants to feel like that they didn't do something that they could have done to help someone. Obviously, that's a regret that I have to live with for the rest of my life.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
That's for the defense.
Yes, sir. The defense will next call Jennifer Myers.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, please. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, ma'am. Please be seated.
Ms. D.
Please tell the jury what your name is.
Jennifer Myers.
Deep breath. And what do you do for a living, Ms. Myers?
I'm a school teacher, exceptional children's school teacher.
Ms. D, you'll need to speak louder or use the microphone, please.
Okay. I will speak louder. And so you told us just now that you teach exceptional children. And can you tell the jury just a little bit about what that means?
I teach, well, I've been teaching for, it's my 26th year, and was teaching students with behavioral and emotional disabilities. And in there, they would have, sometimes they'd be learning disabled or other categories, but their primary disability was behavior and emotional disabilities.
And are there initials that are used for that in the school system?
BED was
And-
what, behavior emotional disability, they
And-
call it.
And what's the other disability label?
And then also in there, they would have OHI, other health impaired, would be a disability that they would have, that could be served in my classroom.
And so you teach only students that have one of those two disabilities?
Yeah, I also, autism could be served in my room too, but it would be primarily, when I taught here in Raleigh, it was OHI and the behavior emotional disabilities were in my room.
And you mentioned when you taught here in Raleigh, where do you teach now?
I teach in Winston-Salem. We moved to Forsyth counties.
And you told the jury you've been teaching for, I think you said 26 years?
This is my 26th year.
And have you taught special needs children the whole time you've been
Yes.
teaching?
That's what I've been teaching the entire time.
And was that an educational specialization for you prior to beginning your work as a teacher? Or was that just a career choice that you made?
It was a career choice. My degree was from College of Special Education.
Okay. So, in special education as your degree, because teaching this student population was always a particular interest of yours?
Yes.
And so you mentioned that you used to teach in Raleigh.
Yes.
And was there a time when you were a teacher for Travion Smith?
Yes.
And what grade would he have been in when you were his teacher?
I taught Travion in 4th grade.
And how long had you been teaching at that time? Approximately.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That probably would have been about 10, 13 years. Well,
So-
yeah.
You had been teaching for a while.
Yeah, yes.
And was there some transition for you in your career around the time that you taught Travion?
Well, when at the school I taught Travion at, it was my first year coming to that school, and it was just a very good, positive school. It was great principal, good leadership, a lot of support for my program, which a lot of schools don't have, and it was just a good group of kids, so it was a very positive time in my life and with that group of kids.
And did you start teaching them that September?
No, I was at a different school, and I came to that elementary school in January.
And you can tell us what
Okay.
elementary school it was.
Okay, Aversboro Elementary in January.
All right. So you were teaching somewhere besides Aversboro, and you came at the semester break, essentially.
Yes.
And you have strong memories of that time
Yes.
for some of those reasons that you were just indicating?
Yes.
And did you said that not all schools were as good for your program.
Right.
And that you really liked the principal at Aversboro.
Yes.
And was the school that you were at prior to Aversboro a sort of a similarly positive experience?
No. It wasn't just, they didn't treat the students as, they didn't want them to be included in a lot of school things. And this school was much better about letting them be included, mainstreaming when they could be mainstreamed, and working with me and treating everyone the same.
And you've been doing this work for a long time now.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had some chance to see sort of long-term outcomes for your students. And is there an impact of mainstreaming your students on their long-term outcomes?
Yeah, I think the more they can get out into the regular classrooms and be around the non-disabled students, it's the better for them.
And what are the ways in which you've come to see that that's better for them?
I'm sorry.
Are there particular outcomes that are better for them if they've had more exposure to?
Yeah, I think they have the more exposure, then they just are around it more, they get included in other things, and they better self-esteem. It's just a much more positive experience for them.
So when you came in the middle of that year, did you have the opportunity to sort of, well, do you remember the name of the teacher who had that group of kids prior to you?
I do remember her name.
Okay. And you don't have to tell us her name.
Okay.
But do you remember reviewing the records and sort of having a sense about how all the kids seemed to be doing in that classroom?
Well, and other teachers would tell me, I guess it just wasn't a very positive room, and they were given more just kind of busier work, and they weren't, showed that they were cared for, kind of, is what I was told by the assistant that was there, was with me also, and it was just a, much more positive environment, I guess, after.
And so did many of your students perform differently on their sort of academic achievement goals during the second half of that school year?
Yes, from what I could tell from the records, they did much better and did well on their EOGs at the end of the year, which was, the big push for teachers to do well on their EOGs. And I do remember Travion did well on his EOGs, and it was a big celebration.
And you said he did well on his EOGs.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have many students who passed their EOGs?
No, it wasn't a very common thing to pass them. So it was a big deal, and it was a big deal to come, from sort of not having a lot of academics in the room to then getting to be able to pass them. It was a big celebration.
And when you say it was a big celebration, are you talking about a classroom party or?
No, it was, I just remember we weren't really supposed to let the kids know if they passed or not, and I do remember Travion took him out in the hallway and told him that he had passed, and it was a positive thing.
And when did you have a chance so that group of kids that you remember quite well, that you had that year at Aversboro, did you teach most of those kids for just one semester?
No, most of them, well, my classroom's 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, so I had, I believe, 2 5th graders when I had Travion in 4th, and they went on to middle school, and then most of them would stay with me 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Because your classroom included all of those grades?
Yes, there's usually a K2 and then a 3-5 for what I teach.
And so it would have been a possibility for Travion to have been with you for a year and a half?
Yes.
And was he with you for a year and a half?
No, he was just with me for that spring semester.
And do you remember, well, let me ask you this. The students that are in your classrooms, do most of them have some problems?
Yes.
And do they have, what degree of problems do most of those kids have when they're with learning?
With learning?
Or with
school?
school?
Okay, well, most of them have problems. They're identified behavioral emotionally disabled, but most of them are, their home environment is a lot of what has kept them behind, not having the support at home and causing some of them to fall behind in their academics.
And when you say they have some problems you feel like over time in the home, are you talking about independent of their homes? Do they have problems?
In my classroom, are they exhibiting problems?
No.
Or, sorry,
but,
I'm not sure
no,
what you're asking.
I'm trying to not ask. You've mentioned that some of them have autism.
Oh, yes.
And some of them have learning disabilities.
Right.
And some of them have some severe emotional problems.
Yes.
And you have described your classroom a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about the types of things that are true about how your classroom is set up and operates.
So we're a very structured environment. We have point sheets where they're every 15 minutes. We document whether they're speaking nicely, following directions, and on task. And it's just it's a way to help, with their behaviors and improve their behaviors. And we always would reward them if they, did well. Their point sheets would go home at the end of each night to be signed. And that way we could have the follow-through with the parents each day on how they did, and always put something positive on their point sheets.
Because they did have some significant issues that needed to be addressed.
Right.
And so having a really closely structured environment like that, was that because of the type of problems that they had?
Yes, I think, yes.
And so when you say that they also had problems with the home environment, is there a relationship between the structure in your classroom and what you perceived as being problems in their home environments?
Well, most homes aren't as structured as a classroom is set up to be, so I think, the structure and the, holding them accountable for what they would do and letting them know you care and all throughout the day. And then when you go home, it's just not set up the same.
But you had a point sheet, and was that an attempt to have some carryover with the parents?
Yes.
And was that so that they could have some sort of system in place at home to reflect what was going on during the day?
Yes. And I would try to always have a relationship with parents also, because the closer parents and teachers work together, it's obviously the better outcome for the student.
Now, we've heard a little bit about what an IEP is today, but can you just remind us what IEP stands for?
Individualized Education Plan.
And do the kids in your classrooms, do they generally all have IEPs?
Yes, they have to.
And is there a team approach to working on the planning for these children?
Yes. There's always a regular education teacher, LEA representative, a special ed teacher, and then parents are always invited to come to the IEP meetings.
And you mentioned that Travion was not with you after that semester.
Correct.
Do you remember where he went afterwards?
He went to the right school, I was told, a different school, alternative school.
And do you remember being a part of that decision-making?
No, I wasn't a part of that decision-making, and I was surprised.
And you mentioned a goal of trying to mainstream children. And in your experience, is there more opportunity to mainstream children in a school like Aversboro?
Yes, because the other schools don't have the normal population. They just have the exceptional children. So
you told us that that you remember Travion being excited when you told him about passing the IEP.
The EOGs.
The EOG,
yeah.
sorry. And can you tell us just a little bit more about what you kind of remember about him as a student when he was there?
About Travion, he was pretty good in class. He would do a couple things, but he was always easy to, get him to see what he had done wrong, and he'd want to do better, and he'd want to get a good point sheet to go home. And he did his work in class. Every now and again, he'd come in tired some, and
Did he seem to have any interest in pleasing you?
Yes, I think he wanted to do well. He wanted to do a good job and please. And he had classmates in there who were, they all knew each other and would be friends.
And do you remember what do you remember about his demeanor?
I just remember when I first met him, when I came in the middle of the year, he seemed sad. He had kind of just sad eyes. I always remember he seemed sad and lonely in his eyes. And he would come in hungry sometimes. We'd make sure to get him breakfast and food, and sometimes clothing from the clothing room, because his clothes were Sometimes, like the undershirt, tank shirts, and clothes were just sometimes big, so sometimes we had to help him with his clothes and making sure he had food.
And you mentioned that the tank tops, and so would that, is that a preferred shirt at school?
No, they're against school rules to have the whole, your side showing.
And so you're not talking about having to get him another shirt because it was necessarily inappropriate for the weather or something like that,
No.
but just because it was against the
It was
school.
against rules, and sometimes, the pants would just be too big.
And-
Not sagging big, just too big.
And you mentioned that you had a clothes bin at the school,
Yeah.
and would you have to find him just a different pair of pants, or would you have to get him, I mean, what would you do to remedy those situations?
Well, it would either be myself or my assistant that would go. We just get him clothing to put on over top of his. Usually it was like maybe a shirt and stuff, because there weren't pants in there a lot, but there were shirts that we would help get him so he could be dressed properly.
And would you have to sometimes get him a belt or something else to hold
Yeah.
up his pants?
String or a belt.
Did they appear to have been clothes that had perhaps been purchased for another person entirely?
The pants definitely seemed like they were not his pants, because they were just not at all his size.
You mentioned that you had a point sheet that you would send home. And was there something that was supposed to happen with that point sheet?
Yeah,
afterward?
parents are to sign them each night, and then they return them the next day in their folder. But Travion's wouldn't get signed. So I got another teacher in the room next to me to sign his point sheet and try to have some, dialogue with him about his day and be congratulatory to him for doing a good job.
Because that's part of what they were used for.
Yes.
And so when the point sheets never came or rarely came back from the home, did that make it difficult for you to put in place the system that you wanted to have?
Yes, I mean, I would keep doing what I would do in my room and keep trying to keep it as positive as I could in the room. And but it does make it difficult when you don't have the parent dialogue and the communication and the follow-through at home with what you're trying to do to make a difference.
And I just wanted to clarify, and also because would the point sheets when they came back from the home also have some notes about how the evening was?
Yeah, there was a spot for what I would write, and then parents sign it, and then they put a comment.
And so when you would speak to the students the next day, you would want to use the comments that their parents had sent back about the evening.
Yes.
And that's what you used the teacher in another classroom for.
Yes.
So you could create the
Right.
ability to have that conversation with
Yes.
Travion. Because you didn't get the feedback from his home.
Yes.
And do you remember do you remember who Travion lived with at the time?
He lived with his father.
And do you remember ever meeting his father?
I remember meeting him, I believe, one time. And he came in, I think he had 2 younger children with him.
And did you have a chance to see Travion interact with his father that one time?
There wasn't a lot of interaction, and I just remember that the father, I was saying, that I was saying positive things about Travion and how he was doing a good job in my room, and I was glad to have him, and I remember the father not agreeing with what I was saying, and that he wasn't doing a good job at all.
So in the one opportunity that you had for that in-person contact, you were trying to get some of that positive message out there.
Yes, absolutely.
And you indicated that Mr. Clark didn't agree with the positive things you were saying.
Right.
And do you remember his reaction being a body language reaction? Do you remember him saying things? What gave you the impression that that wasn't?
I remember him verbalizing that he wasn't doing well and he was trouble and, getting into trouble, and that, this he just wasn't doing well. Can't remember specifically his words, but that was what he was saying, basically.
And you remember, was he saying that in front of Travion?
Yeah, Travion would have been in the room, yeah, because I remember he was in the front of my classroom when I met him.
And would there have been other, his brothers, you mentioned his younger siblings were there?
Yeah, there were two younger ones there, but I don't remember like who else might have been in the room. But,
But it wasn't just that you got that impression, it was that he actually said
no,
that back to you.
He said it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Myers, and so your testimony is you felt like the teacher that had been there before you was not as involved as you would have been necessarily, the level of involvement you would have liked to have seen when you came into that classroom.
And that's just what other
Sure.
teachers had told me.
And as a result of you coming into the classroom, not only all of the students seemed to be performing a little bit better, but Travion made strides that year.
For the time that I had him, I felt like he did, yes.
And you even put on his report card sort of in the last period, he seems to be putting forth more effort. His behaviors have improved. He's getting along well with others and taking more pride in his work. And I imagine as a teacher, you take pride in that.
Definitely.
And with the IEP, the purpose, as we've kind of talked about during the day, is to figure out what's best for the child and work with that. And you made some notes, I think, in his fourth grade one that he performs at or above grade level in reading, math, and writing. I think if I can read your handwriting. But there were things that he was good at.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
And you even saw him starting to interact with his peers more.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you noticed was his sort of ability to get off focused or lose attention. Right.
Yeah.
Which is probably not uncommon in some fourth graders, but that was one of the things that he needed to work on still with you.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that that you had only met his father once, but there would be committee meetings where you would kind of sit down as a group to talk about the progress Travion was making or kind of how he was doing. Isn't that safe to say?
Like in the IEP meetings?
Yes.
Or,
Well, I mean, they're called committee meeting notes, but I assume it's related to the IEP.
Okay, then yes.
And do you recall having one on January 29th where both you and Mr. Clark were present?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. I'm sorry.
And
But
you
that,
have-
that was really early when I came too. I
Okay.
mean, January. I just started in January.
And then
So-
you'd have one at the end of the year, typically maybe May 21st, where he also was in attendance. Do you recall that?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just.
And you haven't obviously had an opportunity to look through those records, have
No.
you? Okay. But it would be common that with the IEP, you would invite the parents
Oh,
to send them a
definitely.
notice and want them to encourage. And so if the notes reflect that he was there in January and May, that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I don't remember it.
And you would have liked to have had him in class the next year because you felt like he had been making this progress.
Right.
And you said that you weren't a part of the process putting him or transferring him from Aversboro to Wright School, and by part of the process, no one asked you your thoughts on
Right.
that.
Usually it would come like from a social worker, CAP workers would work. We would kind of come together to the conclusion that that would be the best thing because he wasn't being successful in my room. And, you know, I just remember that I was surprised when I heard that that was where he was going to be going because I was hoping to have him back for 5th grade.
And for the beginning time frame when you first met him and you described him as seeing sort of sad or the sad eyes, did that seem to improve during your interaction with him during that semester?
Seemed to, because he was seeming to interact more with some of the students.
And did it appear to you that he enjoyed coming to school? As best a fourth grader can.
Yes, as best a 4th grader can. I mean, you know, he would come and he would do what he was supposed to do. And like I said, sometimes he would come tired and hungry, but he seemed to, you know, do well in that environment.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Anything further, Ms. D?
Safe in that environment.
Yes, he did.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and take another short recess and then continue on till 1. So if you'll gather in the deliberation room at 10 minutes past 12, please recall all the rules and instructions I've been giving you. Leave your notebooks. Everyone, please remain seated while the jurors excuse themselves. Ma'am, if you'll stay, just stay for a second. All right, Ms. Myers, you can stay. Anything we need to take up outside the presence of the jury? All right, we'll take a 10-minute recess.
Report on recess for 10 minutes.